it's amazing. While people are very good intentioned when you deal with things like this and loss in general, I think people just don't know what to say. And so they say things that just really, don't make things better and often hurt, and again,
like what do they say that it's not right or
God's
that
got
is
a
right?
purpose for this. And hey, I'm a believer, right, that God can use terrible things. Radical resilience is largely built around the fact that some of our greatest growth, some of our best strengths can come through our biggest adversity. But when you're dealing fresh with the grief of something like that, to hear that God had a purpose for your baby dying, like it doesn't help.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Eternal Optimist podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drinkon, and here as a guide to share with you some of the amazing things from our guests. And we have an amazing guest today. Dr. Andy Garrett is with us from Southern California today, and he was referred by one of our most listened to guests on our show, Mr. Aaron Walker, leader of the Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind Group, certainly a leader out there. When you think of strong leaders in this country, Aaron is someone who's had an impact in a number of my guests. And of course, Andy, Dr. Andy, we'll call him, is one of those people. So let me give you a little background on Dr. Andy Garrett here. We've been talking for like 20 minutes, and it's really easy to talk with him. So I'm going to just read with you a couple things, and I'm probably going to have to stop because the list is so long. But let's just start that he has a doctorate in psychology, and he has extensive experience in working in the education space, in corporate consulting. He is someone we've been talking for a few minutes here. He's a family man. He has a strong faith to what he does, and he is the renowned expert in something that we're going to call radical resilience, which I'm going to ask him to define that. We're going to talk about that in depth today, and he's got some stories. He's got some stories, my friend. So we're gonna go through some of the hard stuff he's been through. We're going to talk about his podcast, the True North Movement podcast. We will, of course, give you all the websites and things you can follow him. But it's gonna be a treat today. So get ready to kind of work on and be with this idea of eternal optimism, this idea of how we can show up for ourselves, for those that we love, and how we can get the most out of this life. We have a strategy of hope and a strategy of you can do it too here on the show. So let's listen to an expert on that. With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Andy Garrett and welcome him. Welcome, Dr. Andy. How are you, sir?
Awesome, Matt. That was impressive and love. I think I hear pretty consistently with Big A that his episodes are one of the most listened to podcast episodes, which I get. If anybody's listening to this, I'm sure I'd encourage them to go back and listen to that episode because I guarantee it's fire. So grateful to be here, excited to have the conversation. And yeah, like you said, I feel like we could have just kept riffing, even before we started this, and looking forward to see where this goes.
Yes, certainly. Let's give the audience a little bit of context of who Dr. Andy Garrett is. So, Andy, I believe you're in Southern California. Have you always been in Southern California your whole life?
Yeah. So I've not ventured out. So I've traveled a lot. But Orange County is where I live. I've moved within a few cities of Orange County. We currently live in Newport Beach, and I've lived here for the past 7 years. And so, did go to grad school in Azusa Pacific, which was just in Los Angeles. It's like the next county up. I moved to Azusa for a short period of time. If anybody's ever lived here, they can probably appreciate why I very quickly moved out of Azusa back into Orange County. But Southern California has been my base. My family's all here. I'm very grateful. We've got just an awesome support system, a church that we're deeply involved with. So yeah, this is home base.
I'm curious, what, in your humble opinion, is the best thing about living in Orange County and why you're still there?
So it's an interesting question because there are certainly aspects about living in California that I'm not the biggest fan of.
We're getting to that next, baby. That's the follow-up question.
So we have had questions. Interestingly, when we have discussed my wife's from Ohio, so she's open. I mean, there's a few times.
Is she a Buckeye? Is she an Ohio State Buckeye?
She not so. Her dad, yes, her dad is a major Buckeye. We actually
Okay.
went to a Ohio State Michigan football game. It was epic. It went to triple overtime. Man, they know how to do football there. It was
Yes.
epic. So
Yes.
that was a lot of fun. But my wife would be open to moving. I've mentioned it a few times. Like she literally packed the bags the minute I mentioned. We've talked about going to Nashville or Tennessee and maybe
Yeah.
South Carolina. But what the draw here, I mean, really, it's family, and we've got a friend base here that we've got amazing friends. So leaving them in the friend base that we've now connected our kids to. My wife's a homeschool teacher. We're part of a homeschool network with amazing, and they do camping trips and hiking and nature. My daughter was just Belle and the Beauty and the Beast play that was epic with a whole community of kids that we just love, and so. That's the biggest thing. The weather's nice, the access to, being able to go to the beach and the mountains in the same day. Like that stuff's all nice, but ultimately it's the people.
Okay. Well, on the other adverse side of it, like what's hard about living in Southern California at this time?
Right at the top of the cost of living here is ridiculous. It is absolutely insane. The cost of housing around here. I mean, I don't know how first time home buyers, I don't know how they get into this market. What most people assume, what they think of probably $1 million home versus what $1 million home is here is there's probably a wide discrepancy. It's probably shocking what you get for $1 million here. So in everything, it feels like everything, our gas prices, one of my good friends ended up moving to Franklin, Tennessee. He's in the same, he's a coach, psychologist. And I mean, I think he said he was saving immediately $5,000 a month just on income tax. I think he was no longer paying for an office, but that's not insignificant. So,
yeah. Wow. So cost of living is high, and the love for the people is also high. So it's
we don't have the issue. Some of the things I think often get portrayed on TV. So Orange County is kind of a bubble in between like Los Angeles and San Diego. So the crime, not to say that homelessness and some of that stuff is an issue, but not nearly as much as you see. Like if you were to go past the county line into Los Angeles. So I do appreciate one of the reasons why I've stayed in Orange County. It fits probably more of our values. So
okay, cool. Well, so thank you for giving us the real deal on Orange County, California. So a family man living in Southern California, you have a father-in-law Buckeye. I'm not going to hold that against you because I'm from a Wolverine family and my wife went to Penn State.
Awesome.
Super cool that you know what matters to you. It's the family and the people are the most important. Yeah. So great to hear that.
Yeah.
So we've been smiling a lot, and I'd like to take you down a different path. It may be a smile now. It was certainly not a smile before. I'd love to talk to you about something that has been incredibly challenging for Dr. Andy Garrett. And you could take us back to yesterday or take us back all the way back to birth, just anywhere in your past. I'd love to just start with what's something that was so incredibly challenging for you that we can start with and share your story.
Yeah, there's kind of two things that come to mind right away. Okay. One, goes back to probably adolescence. It's kind of an accumulation of struggles from childhood to adolescence. But the one that first came to mind was after my wife, Abby, and I got married. We got pregnant for the first time. And, my wife just had a passion and had a strong desire to be a mom. I mean, she was meant to be a mom, and she just is an amazing, incredible mom. But in that first pregnancy, about 22 weeks into it, unfortunately, we had a stillbirth, and it didn't even dawn on me. Like it wasn't even a thought process of that this could be a possible outcome. And here we were, and the doctor that was there helping and treating us was as cold as could be. Clinical, the language, everything that he did, it was so I don't want to say traumatic, but certainly it created a wound and a scar. He could not have handled the situation any worse. And my wife, to see afterwards, the pain. She went into a deep depression afterwards. And so dealing with that, it really forced, me, I've seen this in my work, that if a couple doesn't communicate, if they're not committed to really being able to heal together, something like this can create a wedge in a relationship where people just grow apart, and really end up where they never could have imagined. So I knew right away that I needed help beyond, even my professional knowledge around this. So we got an expert in the field of to help us with the grieving process. We surrounded ourselves with certainly support. It's amazing. While people are very good intentioned when you deal with things like this and loss in general, I think people just don't know what to say. And so they say things that just really, don't make things better and often hurt, and again,
like what? What do they say that's not right or
God's
that
got
is
a
right?
purpose for this. And hey, I'm a believer, right, that God can use terrible things. I mean, radical resilience is largely built around the fact that some of our greatest growth, some of our best strengths can come through our biggest adversity. But when you're dealing fresh with the grief of something like that, to hear that God had a purpose for your baby dying, like it doesn't help, right? It's not something. And again, I know it's well intentioned, but I think there's that. I'm kind of blanking off some of the other things, but it's in things in that vein of kind of everything's going to be okay, and it reflects oftentimes just the discomfort of the person talking, right? I mean, talking about death and grief. That's not exactly an easy subject to talk about. And so I think people in their discomfort say things to want to just make it better, right? Want to kind of say, look at the silver lining in this. And in those moments, one of the things with my wife that I had to do, right, as a husband, I want to come in and I want to help ease her pain. I want to try and fix things. I knew that was the wrong thing to do. And so I had to just sit with her in her grief. Interestingly, we're a part of a nonprofit board now, Legacy Makers, that helps families build legacies. And they asked us if I could write something for them in their magazine on compassion. That is not an area of expertise. So my initial thought was, thanks, but maybe the next one. My wife actually said, no, we're going to write on this, and I'm going to write it with you. That sounded like a doubly bad idea for me. But she wrote on hers effectively, how I was able to step into her grief and how depressed that she was. And because I didn't try and fix things, and because I was able, the word compassion, it means to suffer with. And so I sat with her in her suffering, which helped to lighten her load. I told her that it was okay for her to be angry and to be angry even at God. And so as she processed that, it really enabled her and us to grow together, and our relationship grew so much stronger over time, right? I mean, it took a while, but it's amazing how our trust, our intimacy, everything, and we were blessed after that with two amazing, healthy kids. Rough pregnancies, right? She had to basically go on bed rest, like immediately, and spent the entire pregnancy on bed rest. But that was something that really, I felt so powerless. And, to see my wife that I love go into such a deep, scary place was very difficult. But it also is the basis, again, for some of what I do now, and recognizing how out of that tragedy, we got stronger. So
thank you for sharing, Andy. And I'm uncertain what to say, because I know that it's a deeply challenging, scarring, wounding thing. I guess what I really want to ask is if you could take us back to that conversation, or when you say stillbirth, I believe what that means is that she had the child.
That's right.
At 22 weeks, and the baby was not living.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you know that when she was having the stillbirth that the baby was not going to make it, or was the baby already?
They had informed us that at that stage, there are occasionally some stories where at 22 weeks a baby can survive, but they had informed us that our daughter was not going to be alive, and so to have to go through the whole birth and labor and go through that whole process and knowing already. Thinking about it now, it's I can feel pain in my body right now, even talking about it. Yeah, it was brutal.
Man, I'm sorry, dude. Oof, shoot. Okay. So you go through that process, you have a stillbirth, and then what happens then, if you can even remember, or if you don't want to share, I totally understand. I'm curious what happens in the next 48 hours after that.
Yeah, I mean, again, immediately surrounding. Her parents live in Ohio, so her mom immediately came out here to support. my parents were here and they were, there, my siblings. So we kind of surrounded ourselves with the people that we knew that trusted us and that were there. I had to really listen to my wife and recognize when she wanted people around and when she just needed it to be her and I, and when she needed to just have some time alone. And so, it was there was no guidebook for this. There was no handbook. We were literally figuring it out. While I'm, obviously scared and terrified and concerned for my wife, have my own grief that I'm also trying to process and making sure that I don't just stuff that down. And so, that's part of the challenge in this is making sure that I'm also healing and working through, the pain and the loss, while also trying to be there for my wife. So it was difficult. And again, I did know to reach out and get some professional help pretty quickly. I was fortunate that one of my mentors is like one of the world's leading experts in grief and loss. And so I reached out to him, and he had someone that specialized in stillbirth and infant loss. So that person was really valuable and helping to guide us through the grief process.
Was there a point after this happened that you and your wife had a conversation? You said, we can't risk this happening again. We're not going to try anymore. Or was it something different that we're ready to try right away? I mean, because you have two beautiful children now.
Yeah.
So how did you get to that point where you're even able to try to have a family again?
There was no way that my wife, wasn't going to try again. I mean, obviously we had to, you start working with these high risk perinatologists, the specialist, you no longer go to the regular OBGYNs. And so, they're guiding us through and letting us know the risks and what we can do. And, we had to find someone in that process too, that again, shared our values of, trying to protect life at all costs. And so we found someone that was like, we did cerclage, probably some, practices that are old school. But my wife was like, whatever increases the likelihood of chance of a successful pregnancy, like I'll do whatever that is. And so that's why we did the bed rest for effectively, 40 weeks almost. Being on bed rest for that long time is quite a challenge. We did have to consistently go in, often twice a week for checkups with my daughter, who was our first child after the loss. Man, she never did what she was supposed to on those checkups. Like her heart rate. I mean, we got admitted like probably 10 times during that, with the caveat of you have to be prepared that you may lose. So she was an exercise in resilience. And certainly, just the anxiety that it caused going up. And even to the point of when we finally, when Abby gave birth to her, it had to be induced because they were scared that what was going on with my daughter. They said, hey, we're getting her out today because, this isn't looking good. So, but she is, like I said, she was just Belle in her Beauty and the Beast play. She is super healthy. I mean, she is... Her wisdom is off the charts. If there's ever something that we disagree on about the meaning of a word or the remembering something that we read, I have learned to not disagree with her. She's always right. So takes after her mom that
way. Always right. That's right. Cheers to that. Cool. So you did. You found, when you say bed rest, when I think of that, I think of I pretty much going to be in bed all the time except for I get up and go to the bathroom. Is that pretty consistent? Is that what bed rest is, really?
She can get, she can walk around lightly, not supposed to lift anything more than a few pounds. The second pregnancy where we had our daughter already, that makes it way more challenging because, kids don't understand bed rest. So that was quite a challenge, but just really very limited. Can't go out and, like my sister was up in hiking, camping way up until like her 40th week of pregnancy. That was not us. It was mostly homebound 90+% of the time. Very, very minimal activity. And whenever she did do a little too much activity, she'd start to have symptoms. So like she had to listen to her body, very closely and make sure that she rested whenever she started to, experience some of the symptoms. So
yeah. You just said that she had to listen to her body, and you mentioned earlier that you could feel some of that pain kind of stirring up inside yours. And it reminds me that I would not have known what you really meant, but even as recently as 6 months ago, I read a book from my coach called "The Body Keeps the Score."
Yeah. Yep.
And that's helped me to understand, how things might get stuck in the body. And I wonder, is this something intuitive to you, Dr. Andy, where you're able to sense that something is a little bit off and your body talks to you? How does that play out for you in any of that thought?
Yeah, I would say not intuitive. It definitely was something I had to learn. I think something I've gotten, much better at it. I think, earlier in life, I was really detached from my emotions and didn't understand, responded to them in very self-destructive ways. So I've had to really learn and to be able, part of it, again, with the radical resilience concept is, suffering and struggles and pain are an inevitable part of life, right? If you want to accomplish anything great, you're going to experience setbacks and failures and tough times. Once you accept that, then it's like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to let that stop you? Are you going to let it keep you down? So, if we're moving towards, well, of course not, I'm going to get back up. I want to help people get back up quicker and quicker so that you maximize the amount of time that you spend learning, growing, succeeding, and minimize the time you spend feeling stuck, struggling. And part of that is getting really good at listening to your body, right? And understanding early. So instead of letting some of those, the feeling, the pain in your body, understanding where you feel it. For me, I know I tend to feel, stress like right in my gut and in my chest. So if I can get good at recognize that earlier and earlier, then I can address it, right? There's countermeasures. There's things that I can do to effectively neutralize that feeling. And then I can create a biology of courage or a biology of resilience, right? So now I've got a countermeasure that enables me to start to take forward action. So I think that's a really important skill set.
I love that we've transitioned into this radical resilience. So, and you talk about building a biology of courage as a countermeasure to when you start to feel it in your body. And I'd love just to give you the floor. I'll let you talk about your expertise, talk about radical resilience and this biology of courage, and take it any direction you like, Dr. Andy, because we're all a captive audience. So please talk about radical resilience and how that's serving us.
Say if I can put a primer down first on radical resilience, the two areas of expertise that I have are in identity and resilience. And really it's the merging of those two that makes the resilience radical. I think we were talking a little bit earlier that the term radical, it certainly does refer to extreme. But if you go to the dictionary, the word radical also means to get to the fundamental root or essence of something, to get to the very core of it. And so we start from a place of helping to define that kind of we call true north identity. We use true north as opposed to magnetic north. True north is a fixed set location, right? It remains constant, stable. Magnetic north, on the other hand, it is constantly changing, slightly shifting, because it's responding and reacting to the electromagnetic field of the environment. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, live that way, right? Their sense of values, their sense of morality, who they are, their personality, it shifts, right? They're reading and reacting to whatever social environment they're in. So who they are at the bedroom versus the boardroom versus, church versus, maybe with the boys. It can shift in a way that I think is unhealthy and actually undermines resilience, right? It becomes exhausting, constantly having to read and react and trying to be who your environment, is kind of what it's pulling out of you, as opposed to I predetermined, right? A set of core values that remain constant no matter what room I'm in, a purpose, right? I have a purpose statement that's one sentence. It's true of who I am as a dad. It's true of who I am in my work. It's true. Now, how it gets manifest obviously can be different, but it remains constant. So it becomes a true north. And we live in a world where there's so much uncertainty, right? There's so much chaos. There's, in the information age, we get more information coming at us and more decisions that we have to make by 10 a.m. than our ancestors would have to make often in a week. And we get technology that rapidly changes. So we're having to constantly to adapt to that and evolve. So the ability to be resilient is not only an essential skill now, I think more important now than ever. And I'll throw on a side part of resilience, which is agility, right? So not just being resilient, but being able to do it efficiently, effectively, and having the ability to pivot when the old ways of doing things no longer work. But being resilient and being agile are largely contingent, or at least made radical, when you have a secure sense of identity, when you know who you are, right? And that remains constant and stable. We know just even the research that when you know your core values and you feel connected to them, you feel capable of overcoming just about any external, like, hard circumstances. And so, going true north creates an organic sense of resilience, so that you're not having to rely on willpower or having to always, react out of resilience. You're already in a highly resilient state of mind and being when you're heading true north, right? Using your guiding principles to respond to difficult moments, to make high level decisions. So that's the thing that is unique about our program, is most programs just immediately start with resilience. Like, let's build. And there's some great ones out there, right? Marty Seligman has probably one of the biggest ones. He sold his program to the Pentagon for, I don't know how much, probably hundreds of millions. And it's a great program, but I think it's missing, right? If you're going directly to resilience, to me, it's kind of like throwing paint on the wall, hoping that it sticks, versus when you do the true north work first, it's like putting a primer down, right? And then you're attaching.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we know that what we're doing is anchored to your core values. We know that it's anchored to what's most authentic about you. Therefore it's personalized and customized, and how that relates in the corporate setting is really powerful, because we're really aligning the true north of the organization to the true north of the individuals, right? And figuring out how there's alignment there, which significantly increases engagement, increases motivation, loyalty, decreases turnover, absenteeism, things that are major problems in the workplace today. And so, and then we add the tried and true resilience principles, like, focusing on what you can control, learning how to, some mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises, being able to, create a mindset and narrative around hardship that finds kind of a growth mindset, right? Instead of seeing setbacks as failures, you see them as opportunities to continue to learn and grow. But we give very specific exercises that help people to get really clear in exactly how they're going to turn adversity into to fuel for radical growth and purpose.
Awesome. I guess what I feel compelled to share right now is I love the idea of the true north identity, and I feel that I have a true north identity for myself. And I also feel that in this place where the prevailing sentiment of the time may give us a place where the majority of people may have more of a magnetic north, or at least the loudest voices are magnetic north.
Yeah.
And I feel that my true north sometimes, I'm not going to say I'm scared to be it or say it, but I've been persecuted for asking questions that would lead people to be accountable.
Yeah.
That would lead people to own their own actions, their own words. And I'm curious, for someone who I believe that I am pretty resilient. I believe that I do have a true north. It's constantly being tested, though, in a public forum, that if I post anything on the social media, it's simply asking a question about why, blah, 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 vaccine this, or why ownership of your actions and take personal responsibility for drug use this. I ask any questions that are why, or why did you do that, or what are you going to own about that? There's instant persecution, and I'm called bad names. Yeah. So I'm curious, how might you coach someone like me in a place that I feel I'm pretty resilient? I feel that I'm pretty true to my values, but those are constantly tested, and it's enough to make me want to stop or just be quiet. What would you say to someone like me who might feel that way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will answer as a quick caveat in that. I remember reading a study that came out of the Claremont, the Claremont schools here in Southern California. And it was looking at the effect of uncertainty on people, right? We know uncertainty is one of the biggest causes of anxiety, stress, and you ratchet up the level of uncertainty in any area of life enough, right? Financial uncertainty, relationship uncertainty, health uncertainty. It will shut down your ability to really grow, right? You tend to get tunnel vision. You have a tough time being able to see the full picture. Your ability to problem solve gets significantly impaired. Your creativity gets limited. So it's incredibly debilitating. interesting, the most profound and debilitating form of uncertainty is the one that most people have never heard of. It's called self-uncertainty, right? And it effectively is that sense of when you don't have a consistent sense of who you are, values that you can trust and rely on, right, in any setting. You don't have a consistent sense of purpose, of how you handle things, of a strategy for how you live your daily life. And because we're constantly in relationship with ourselves, if we have that self-uncertainty, we have this overwhelming need to resolve it. But if we don't have the answers within, we tend to look externally. And they say the more self-uncertainty that you create in someone, the more likely they are to then attach their identity to extreme ideas or groups. Right. So it creates, because it gives the illusion then of certainty. Okay. And I just mentioned that because I feel like you see that right now. Right. And it tends to create a real rigidity, a real intolerance, a real sense of judgment, almost kind of tribalism. And so the answer to that really, right, is being able to come back and help people to really go inward, to help them to answer the questions like, what really matters to you? What does it mean to you? Why is it important? How do you want to live that out? When people start to develop a mature understanding of who they are, what they believe, why they do what they do, it is incredible how much more tolerant, how much more loving, how much more powerful, right, they become. But it's an uncomfortable thing to ask people to go there. So having said that, having worked with some wildly successful people that are holistically successful, right, I'm sure, it refers to you. What we've seen is those people do have a strong sense of true north. It's not a particularly sexy formula, but once you have a clear sense of true north, really at that point, then it's just about consistency. Are you creating, kind of habits, processes, schedules, structure that enables you to be, radically consistent with that? And then inevitably you're going to get knocked off course, right? Whether that's an argument with your wife, whatever it might be. Something at work, economic restraints. So the ability to quickly course correct, I've used the metaphor, I'll try and say this really quickly, but of airplane travel, right? Commercial travel, minus some Boeing flights recently, I believe it's the safest form of travel that exists out there. And it's incredibly reliable. For the most part, I've never gotten on a plane and not ended up at exactly the airport that I bought a ticket to. And that might seem unremarkable, but it's unremarkable because of how much we expect, right, to get to our chosen destination. There's three overarching principles that I believe are relevant to the question that you ask here with airplane travel. The first one is, if we're going from LAX to JFK, we don't get on there and say it's good enough if we end up in New Jersey or Boston. So the airplane immediately sets a set of coordinates, a very specific location or destination. That's their true north, right? They're really clear of exactly where they need to get to. And it's not shifting. It's not constantly moving. It remains stable so that when you course correct, you know exactly what you're course correcting to. The second component of that is that I've heard once an airplane's up in the air, over 90% of the time, it's off course, right? Because of turbulent air, because of, birds, other flights that might be in their flight path. So they're constantly needing to course correct. That's effectively resilience, right? There is no pathway to, again, achieving anything great where you're not going to experience rough air, turbulence, setbacks. So the ability to course correct is absolutely critical in knowing what you're course correcting to. The third piece is that agility. Getting back to that, if you're off course for too long, right, it can end up disastrous. Even if you're a degree or two off and you don't course correct quickly enough, that can end up in sometimes, deadly or in life, right? It could end up in divorce or in health situations or a business, who knows, a lawsuit or whatever it might be. And I've seen all these things where someone, knew that they needed to course correct, but maybe they were conflict avoidant, maybe, whatever it was. So that ability to recognize quickly and that ability when the flight path that you chose is no longer available to pivot and be able to choose a new path and find creative ways of getting there. Those three overarching principles, I think, are the basic formula for radical, consistent success. If you want to live your best life, often to, true north, resilience to that true north, and then agility and being able to apply the resilience. There's other things you could throw in there like communication, leadership, courage, but those three things from a high-arching level, I think, are the absolute critical skills. Does that help with the question that you asked in that sense of when
I
you
think it's
do
a great foundation. Yeah, I think it's a great foundation to give our listeners. Like, here's where you start. You start to examine first. Do you know where you're going? Are you going towards a dartboard? Are you going towards a bullseye? I mean, are you going to Boston? Or are you going to East Coast? I mean, so it's
Yes.
where are you going? Number one. Number two, it's the idea that 90% of the time the planes are off course and there's turbulence and there's birds. There's all kinds of stuff going on. So if you're constantly in a place of turbulence, how you learn to course correct is important. So the course correction through turbulence is important. And then number three is the agility, just to recognize quickly that there is a need to pivot. There is a need constantly to be pivoting and recognizing a new path and being agile enough. I feel that's what I took note of and heard. So that gives me a foundation to now go forth and battle the turbulence. What if the turbulence is of a nature that we've not yet experienced? So there's some uncertainty, there's some fear, there's some paralysis, there's something in the turbulence that's a new enemy or it's an unknown enemy. Then how might we apply these foundational principles in the face of a new challenge? Because if you're a leader and you're running a company, or you're a leader and you're leading your family, and there's constant technology upgrades, there's constant turmoil politically and with the news, if you still watch the news. So if you're facing new uncertain challenges, you're battle tested and you're ready. And then a new challenge comes on you've never heard of before. How might you start to approach that new stuff if you've never seen it before?
I think that's why it's critical. And if we're going to stick with this metaphor here, is who do you either have in the cockpit with you? Who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with? Whether that's a coach, if it's people in a mastermind that hopefully have some different skill sets and knowledge than you that you can turn to, right? And get consulting, get support to help level up. I think that the other component that kind of relates to that, but it's maybe a little retrospective. One of the reasons why airplanes are so safe for the most part is they're the black box, right? Every time that a plane goes down, there's a black box in a plane. They go and to find that, and then they figure out what went wrong, and they use that to get better. Right. I mean, that is a radically resilient principle. It's actually used in the book Anti-Fragile, right? And Anti-Fragile is just taking resilience, to the extreme of, instead of just getting back up or bouncing back up, it's like you're bouncing back with just incredible momentum and getting stronger and stronger through adversity. That's what our program's all about. And so, the ability to, I think it was John Maxwell, and talked about early in his career, he had very ambitious goals. And he always thought that time and experience equals wisdom. And he realized that a lot of people have time and experience, but no wisdom. So he added the moniker evaluated experience, right? And every day he created a process of, at the end of the day, acknowledging what went well and why, and what didn't go well. What could he learn from it? What would he do differently? And because of that, he claimed that was the greatest habit that he created to significantly start to reach his goals and become the go-to expert, in leadership.
You just hit on so many amazing things. If you're in a challenging place, if you're in a place of uncertainty or a place of great turmoil, then look around you. Who's around you? Who's advising you, or who's comforting you? Who are the people around you? So that might be, we all look in the mirror and do a deep assessment and inventory of who's around us. So that's one thing I heard. And the second thing, brilliant. I'm going to ask you just to kind of riff on this one a little while. You talked about just the idea of the evaluated experience. Yeah. How is that a foundational principle for radical resilience? If you can give an example and just talk about that, please.
Yeah, it's huge on both sides of the evaluated experience of both evaluating what went well. And I think we talked about the very first thing that we talked about when we got on this call together, as you were sharing with me, right, some things that were going really well. The ability to do just a daily, celebrating small victories. It can be small or big, but especially us A-types, people that are perfectionists, highly driven, we tend to do a terrible job of celebrating victories, and yet we do a great job of thinking of all the things that didn't go well and ruminating on it, right?
Yes.
Daniel Kahneman, who wrote the amazing book Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, That book won Nobel Prize, the first behavioral economist scientist to ever win the Nobel Prize. And he said that if you were to do just a daily process of acknowledging 1 to 3 victories, 1 to 3 things that went well, right? And you said, here's what choice I made or what I did that led to that going well. And ideally, if you can connect it to a core value, that gets even stronger. And then just, I think he said if you did that for a week, you would see significant enhancements in your mood, your motivation. If you stuck with it for a month, you would be addicted to the process because of the overwhelming transformational benefits it would create. It doesn't really take that long. I do it every night with my kids. I make sure one of the last things that we talk about, right? Tell me one thing that went well today. It's amazing. And then giving a fist bump, a high five, that actually creates a quick little hit of dopamine, which then reinforces, right, that dopamine is important for learning and making sure that we maintain what we learn. So it creates a reward, right? And then it hardwires that behavior and makes you motivated to want to do more. So, which is an important resilience principle, all right? When you're going through tough times, it's easy to get just really focused on things you can't control, all the things that aren't working. You need that ability to acknowledge small little victories. It's how you maintain motivation. It's how you create hope, right? Hope is an integral part of resilience. And then the ability when things don't go well, there's an exercise known as a benefit finding exercise that we use. I first heard about it with veterans that experience trauma. We all know about PTSD. Are you familiar with post-traumatic growth?
Tell me more.
Yeah, most people aren't. I'll go in front of a room of 150, 200 people, and maybe 1 or 2 people have ever heard of it, and I don't get it. I don't understand why that's not more common knowledge. That yes, trauma can be terrible, but there's an entire pathway in which trauma can lead to significant growth and lead to thriving. So, in the first study, at least that I read about, soldiers experience trauma. The Army and the military tried to find all kinds of ways to intervene. In this, they help give them tools. What do you have the ability to control? What do you have no control over? It gives them some tools to what to do and how to let go of the stuff they can't control, how to acknowledge and accept their emotions and kind of work through that. But really, the main part is then, of what I can control, right? I can control how I respond. I can control my attitude. I can control, choosing my values. There's not much that you can consistently control no matter what. But those 3 things alone give you tremendous capacity for growth and freedom. And so once you say, all right, here's what I can control, you ask, I of course wouldn't have chosen to go through this. This was really difficult. But is there some way that I might benefit from this? Is there some lesson that I can learn? Is there a character strength I can develop? Courage, empathy, right? Whatever it might be. And then is there some way that I could use that wisdom or that character strength to benefit people and causes I care about, turn it into purpose? Now, all of a sudden, the story that you've created around your trauma is one of empowerment, right? It's one you can actually take action on. And it leads to something that really matters to you, right? It's authentic. It's something that you care about. And it completely changed the trajectory of how trauma affects us. And it leads to us growing and thriving. I use that exercise. It doesn't have to be trauma, but anytime you experience, right? I mean, that's the story my wife and I went through, even though we weren't actively processing through that exercise effectively, right? We had to focus on what we could control. We had to learn how to communicate and how to trust each other and build compassion. And that led to us being able to grow, right? And created purpose because it made us better parents, made us better for each other too. So that framework, I help clients to make that their go-to meaning-making framework whenever they experience something difficult so that it immediately starts, whatever thing that they're going through, while they might really hate that they're dealing with it, they very quickly are able to identify a very specific, authentic pathway for growth for them.
Wow. Incredibly valuable. And tell us, how do we find out more about you? And tell us, is there a website and social media places we can find you? Because this is fascinating. And I love the idea of post-traumatic growth. I love everything you've shared today. I think it's invaluable. I encourage our listeners to go check out Dr. Andy Garrett at his places. So where can we find you, Dr. Andy?
Best place to go is to my website, ag-thrive.com. So that's Thrive, Thrive. Make sure you put the dash between AG and Thrive. Otherwise, it'll take you to an agricultural site. And then, if you want to leave my LinkedIn a link, you can go there. But the best place to connect with me is on my website.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate this. This has been amazing to hear from you. And just dear listeners, we've only had just a glimpse into what Andy does, and just imagine the opportunity to connect with him and his team to lead your group through an exercise of finding the true north for the individuals and for the organization, and how by building that identity first, it can empower us to truly be radically resilient and be able to take the challenges and learn from them even more effectively, and empower others. And that's how it works. Just take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, take care of your team, and it spreads. And Dr. Andy is a vessel for that. So please reach out to him. And while you're doing it, while you're reaching out to him, take note of these answers. I'm about to put him through the lightning round, and here are his recommendations on some things. So Dr. Andy, it's been great to have you today. If I could ask you, if you're a reader, what might be one or two books that have had an impact on you that you'd recommend?
Favorite book, hands down, is from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. It is not a light read. He went through 5 Nazi concentration camps. But I mean, talk about radical resilience, right? He was able to, my favorite personal development quote, and I'll end it on this as a recommendation, comes from that book. He says, between what happens to us and our response, there's a space. And in that space is where our capacity for growth and freedom exist, right? We often give away that space. But if we get good at start recognizing, I get triggered by something that happens at work, the ability to have, tools where I can slow down and allow my prefrontal cortex, allow my brain to kick in so I can problem solve, has been an absolute game changer for me and my clients. So, but that book is incredible.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's take it to music if we can. Is there an artist or a song or a genre that really just lights you up and gets you into that flow state that you can recommend for us?
I gotta admit, so I don't listen to a ton of music anymore, but my son absolutely loves rock and roll, and even some of my old like punk and kind of hard rock music. He's 8. My son's 8. So, but if he and I are driving together, he's like, "Can you put on Fugazi or AC/DC or some of these songs?"
Yes.
So and it does. I will admit that it still gets me fired up.
That's awesome. Every morning when I walk into my office, I turn on AC/DC Thunderstruck, and that's my ritual for kicking off my day. So super cool. Thank you.
That drum starts beating, right?
Yeah. Heck yeah, it does, man. That thing gets me jacked. I played it every soccer game for my 9-year-old on the way to soccer. So yeah, love it. Last question, and I'll give you the last word, Dr. Andy. We're on the Eternal Optimist podcast. And when I say eternal optimist, what might that mean to you, sir?
Yeah, I think we talked about Marty Seligman earlier, and he wrote a book on learned optimism. So that's what it brings up for me. And he's got a whole model of how you respond to good news and good things happening versus bad news and bad things happening, and the optimistic explanatory style. And so, super briefly, when something good happens, you believe that there's something you did that helped it happen. It's going to start to spill into other areas of life, right? And it's going to continue to get better and better. When something bad happens, you often see it. There's some room for, inward accountability, recognizing where you could grow, but also not seeing it as like it's all my fault. Not seeing it as that it's going to spill into multiple areas of life, and that bad thing's going to be isolated too. The opposite is a pessimistic framework. He got into that research because he was doing it originally on learned helplessness, which is the basis for depression, right? It's being fragile instead of anti-fragile. He got depressed. So, reading and writing about that, it actually triggered depression for him. So he started to write then about the opposite. Then he created the whole positive psychology movement, which is just incredible, which is all about helping us to live is far, on the thriving side of the spectrum of well-being as we possibly can.